The conservative counterrevolution in the era of Reagan and G.H.W.H. Before the election of Reagan in 1980, conservatism and liberal values were on and off ideals. Between the 1950s and 80s, overall domestic and discretionary federal spending increased, specifically causing the standard of living to improve, inflation and taxes to increase, and the number of jobs to fluctuate. An event known as the Sun Belt migration resulted in 40 million Americans moving from the Northeast to the Midwest for jobs and factories, which greatly increased the electoral votes for conservatism, all of which placed the Democratic Party at jeopardy. A former movie star turned politician, Reagan advertised himself as one for localism, limited federal social welfare roles, and unfettered capitalism. In 1966 and 70, he won both elections for governor of California. As governor, he slashed budgets for those in poverty by depleting funds for child welfare and mental health, overall not caring for civil rights. In 1976, Reagan was defeated by Ford for the Republican nomination, but in 1980 he began to pursue presidency. Fellow candidate Carter faced Reagan, but Reagan won because he heavily used media to advertise tax cuts, conservative philosophy, and his advocacy for the military, while Carter was seen as soft and preached in regards to cutting social spending. Reagan's first 8 months included him securing major budgets and tax cuts and increasing military spending. He was able to get so much done so soon due to the Democrats being severely demoralized after Reagan's victory. Even though the Democrats outnumbered the Republicans in Senate by 38 seats, their majority House Leader Tip O'Neill was a man lacking drive or initiative, resulting in little to no Democratic action. In the meantime, Reagan plotted to capitalize on the Democrats through militias, centralization, surprise tactics, tax cuts, and increase in military spending, while protecting specific programs to come off as more compassionate. He still took many funds from those in poverty, totaling to $50 billion in cuts, which he was able to do due to offering higher positions to Democrats in exchange for their majority vote in his favor. One specific plan he created, OBRA, took food stamps from 400,000 people, cut programs for those in poverty, and cut funding for those in low-income areas. Reagan soon lost momentum due to the administration splitting into two groups. One group wished taxes to be raised in fear of the federal deficit increasing more, while the other group wished taxes to be lowered in fear of economic growth being jeopardized. In 1984, the deficit Reagan created far outweighed any other president. He increased taxes, which led to the Tax Equity Fiscal Responsibility Act, which led to corporations losing tax concessions, people wondering whether Reagan lacked policy understanding, and eventually a time of increased unemployment. In 1984, Reagan led much higher on the polls versus Mondale, which brought him into his second term. During this time, he increased defense spending to $1 trillion, increased domestic and federal spending, contributed no increase in taxes, but did end up returning benefits to those with disabilities. In 1988, G.W.H. Bush won the election for presidency versus Michael Dukakis. Both were pictured as tough on crime, patriotic, and believers in a strong military defense. As Bush entered his presidency, he continued to increase military spending and resisted tax increase. He was far more preoccupied with foreign policy rather than fixing the high deficit or the education, environment, and drug abuse issues he advertised in his campaign. Civil rights were once again neglected. In 1990, as the Cold War came to a close and the United States continued to see a deficit increase, we saw this as an opportunity to recast our federal budget. It was proposed that we should move as much of the annual $150 billion budget from military to domestic spending budget as we could. Rather, though, Bush agreed to allow some new taxes, preserve the ratio of the domestic spending budget and military budget, and agreed, though, to decrease the overall budget for both by placing caps. Bush also expressed many goals for the increase in funds in regards to drug prevention, but failed to create any programs in which we could place any funding, which caused nothing to get done. On May 17, 1992, 150,000 people marched in Washington, D.C. to demand an increase in federal aid to cities, health, housing, and job training as Bush's only term came to a close.